Call the City of Kingman City Council work session to order Monday, March 25th. All work sessions items listed are for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. The primary purpose of the work session meetings is to provide the City Council with the opportunity for an in-depth discussion and study of specific subjects. Public comment is not provided for on the agenda and may be made only as approved by consensus of the Council. In appropriate circumstances, a brief presentation may be permitted by a member of the public or other interested party on an agenda item if invited by the mayor or city manager to do so. The mayor may limit or end the time for such presentations. Clerk Meredith, would you like to do roll call?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor Watkins is excused this evening. Vice Mayor Samley.
Here.
Councilmember Eric.
Present.
Councilmember Savage.
Here.
Councilmember Scott Staley.
Present.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Councilman Walker, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? All right, agenda item today, we have one, available revenue sources for city services and projects. City staff will present to council a variety of revenue sources that are available to cities for funding, reoccurring and/or one-time city services and capital projects. Interim Deputy City Manager, Tina Moline.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor and Council. So this afternoon, well, I guess let's start it by saying why we're here today and what the request was. So about 6 to 8 weeks ago, we were asked to look at some new or additional revenue sources that could fund some of the commitments that the council has taken on over the last few years, most importantly, probably public safety and streets. And so today, we will walk through some ideas, some options in funding those types of commitments going forward. And if there is an election process, what that election process looks like. So looking at the different revenue sources for city services and projects, we have some that the council has the authority to increase or decrease at any time. We also have some that requires the vote of the people. And then we also have an option that would require a petition to be signed by property owners. So for no voter approval, meaning that the council has the authority, we've got things such as user fees, really. That's the primary source. And user fees are, talking about general fund purposes, user fees would be things like our parks and our recreation and our golf course, building permit fees, those sorts of things can be increased by the council anytime. Then we have sales tax and a primary property tax that would have to be approved by the voters, and then property owners for something like a fire district, if we chose to move the fire district out of the city and into something to a different method of management. Yes.
What would be the benefit of going to a district as opposed to keeping it to the city?
So we're going to talk about that towards the end of the presentation. All right, so for no voter approval. So as we go into these, I wanted to look a little bit at, I took 4 different divisions that are costly divisions for the general fund that the council has the authority to review fees. And I wanted to show what the cost of these departments are and then the fees that we're generating specifically for these departments, so that maybe there's a way we can generate some additional revenue, right, through fees rather than looking to maybe those voter required types of fees. So we look at our building permits and our planning and zoning fees. That department in fiscal year 23, we budgeted $1.5 million, and we collected that year just over $600,000. For fiscal year 24, we're expecting to collect about $850,000. Total costs are expected to be about $1.6 million. So there is a deficit there. So again, there's an opportunity here, maybe, depending on the will of the council, to make up some of the sales tax dollars that we're using for other things such as streets and maybe some of public safety. Looking at our parks, it's a little bit of a different story, meaning we definitely do not have very much cost recovery for the expenses that are incurred in that department. And of course, there's a reason why. Certainly, we want to subsidize and encourage people to use our parks facilities. But you'll see there that in fiscal year '24, we're expecting a deficit of $2.6 million. So we're collecting very little in our parks department. Maybe an opportunity, right? Moving on to our recreation and pools fees, similar, we'll look at fiscal year '24. We're expecting to collect $242,000 in revenues and spend about $1.2 million, so a deficit of close to $950,000. And then lastly, I wanted to point out the golf course. In some cities, they actually have the golf course as an enterprise fund, meaning that the users will typically pay for the cost of the golf course with very little subsidy from the general fund. We've always treated it as more of an amenity, right, rather than you're going to pay for the use of it. But this is another department in the general fund that does take some of the sales tax dollars and state shared revenues that we generate to be applied towards the operations of it. And in fiscal year '24, there will be a deficit we're anticipating of about $470,000. So those are the big fees or the big differences in the general fund as far as departments are concerned that are taking up some of those sales tax dollars and state shared revenues. Of course, there's a cost benefit, and if you look at it as amenities or not, but some other options for you. Are there any questions on that piece of as far as the program is, as far as what we're covering so far? I was going to move on.
Sorry.
Yes.
I said I wouldn't ask questions, but when we're budgeting, I don't think we've ever had a conversation that went something like, we'll just take the golf course, for example. We set a goal of only putting $500,000 or less out of the general fund, and it has to make up the rest, right? We never talk about it that way. So then what happens is, as budget comes around, you guys have your panels, and then sometimes the golf course gets more, sometimes it gets less. Is that right?
It's based on whatever we expect to collect in revenues. And yeah, as far as budgeting is concerned, that's
Right.
correct, based on whether or not maybe one year they need a couple of pieces of equipment versus
Right.
maybe one year they don't. That
Or
is
if they
correct.
need new golf carts, or
Yep.
they need whatever.
Mhm.
So would it be beneficial to start looking at some of these and saying we're only going to subsidize this by X amount of dollars for each of these? And that way the directors can start planning a little bit differently on how they spend their funds?
I would say definitely when it comes to equipment, I think that we can look more long-term in some of the departments. I think that there is a benefit there for sure. And we could definitely work with them on that piece. I think the operation, for just the general operating expenses, it's an expensive department, and it's just managing the turf, and it's chemicals, and it's landscaping, some of those basic. There's very little, I would say, we're gonna, do an improvement to the golf course and add a bunch of new tables and things. There's very little of that goes on. But I definitely can say with golf carts and mowers and some of those expensive pieces of equipment, I think we can do a better job as far as managing it over the full 5-year plan rather than everything in 1 year,
Okay.
for sure.
All right. Thank you.
And that goes to all of those departments.
I wasn't picking on the golf.
No. Yep. Let's see. And again, there are some departments that do plan out, and maybe some we don't push as hard. So that is a great suggestion, Councilwoman Staley. So this is one that we've talked about for a little while, is the public safety and or a street fee, right? Can we just assess each water customer some sort of fee to help cover these costs? And is Carl on, Annie? Did he happen to zoom in? Okay. Okay, so if you remember, I don't know, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago, we actually talked about, Councilwoman Staley would remember this, we talked about maybe a street fee. And back then it was a street fee, really it's more like a tax, it doesn't really matter how you charge it, you might get an SB 1487 claim or something to that extent. So it was highly not recommended. Well, then, when Grady was here, he had shared that Fountain Hills had a public safety fee, and I was shocked, actually. I contacted Fountain Hills, actually, and asked if that was the case. I did see that they went to their council in about the 2019 time to talk about a public safety fee, similar to just a dollar amount per water customer or per property owner. And they said that it actually ended up never getting implemented. In 2019, the council decided not to move forward with it. One of the state legislators had reached out and wasn't saying that they were necessarily going to file an SB 1487 claim, but had indicated that they weren't sure that it was legal, that it was more like a tax and not a fee, which we are not allowed to assess these types of taxes. And that's how it is pretty much looked at, which is why cities and towns don't assess a public safety or tax fee per water customer or per property owner, because it's looked at as more like a tax. And that was a legal opinion back then. Carl is on and may be able to give a little bit more background on that, but I did want to clear that up because I know that that was shared with the council. Yes, Councilman.
Can you refresh my memory when SB 141753?
I don't even need to refresh it. I probably just need to tell you about it because you
Thank
probably,
you.
yes, absolutely. So goodness, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a bill that passed that basically said if a state representative felt that a city was doing something not correctly or illegally, then they could basically say, hey, city, we're going to send you a letter. You can rectify it. You have so much time, 30 days, I believe, to rectify it. Otherwise, we are going to begin withholding your state shared revenues. And so I believe only Tucson is the only city that has had a claim against them, but you certainly do not want your state shared revenues, and they will withhold those until it is rectified, the issue is rectified. And we are unsure at this point if you actually get to collect the amount that you did not get to collect during that period. So I don't know that you're ever made whole. Carl, do you want to chime in? Did I get that right?
Yeah, sorry, I was in the process of trying to get connected, but correct. You did get that correct.
Okay.
So.
That's what an SB 1487 claim is. You're welcome. So I don't know what the appetite is here, but definitely wanted to address it and bring it up for the council to be aware. Are there any questions on that, or what our thoughts are on that? Okay, I'll just move forward then. Okay, so then as far as voter approval is required, we know that sales tax is something that goes out to the voters. Not knowing really what we would want to, what type of increment we would want to take to the voters, not knowing exactly the direction from you, I showed a few different rate increments, and then also said, well, if we just took our entire TPT and every category and just said we're going to increase it by 0.25%, that would generate $2.8 million. If the council said, no, let's just impose it on our restaurant and bars, 0.25% would generate about $320,000. And if that happened, it could be used for any purpose, meaning it could go to streets or public safety or anything that the council designates to. And then the hotel motel tax at 0.25% would generate $150,000. Now that particular tax, any more increases that we make to our hotel motel tax has to be used specifically for tourism related activities. It can't be used for anything other than that. So this gives you an idea of what each increment would generate. I also have before you today, because we always ask what other cities and towns are doing and who has a sales tax, who has a primary property tax. So in front of you is a little publication that we get from the Arizona League of Cities and Towns. Basically gives some basic information about the cities, their population, county, some of the services they provide, property tax rates, sales tax rates. This data is, the sales tax data on this is accurate as of it's 2 years old to date. So I would say that most of the information on here is still pretty reliable. A lot of it does not change. Some of the population may have changed since our last census numbers. But so when we look at this list, There are 91 incorporated Arizona cities and towns. And so of those, just to give you an idea of the sales tax and property tax, there are 47 only that have a primary property tax. The other 44 actually do not have a primary property tax. Of the cities that don't, interestingly enough, Mesa and Gilbert don't have a primary property tax. So big cities, right? But they do not have that. They do have secondary property taxes, though, so certainly they have incurred some debt to pay for some things. Of the cities and towns that don't have a primary property tax, 8 also don't have their own police department, and 23 don't have a fire department. 7 of them don't have either of those departments. Also, of the cities and towns that don't have a primary property tax, 38 of them don't have a golf course that they manage. And then lastly, of the cities and towns that don't have a primary property tax, only 3 of them have a police department, a fire department, and a municipal golf course that they operate. And that would be Kingman, Page, and Wellington. So just, again, we always ask where we compare. So just wanted to throw out just some interesting statistics when we talk about the different taxes and services that we provide compared to other cities. You said you were going to wait till the end.
Well, I can't on this one since we're on the taxes. Can you explain to us and the public the difference between the primary and secondary property tax rates?
Absolutely. So the primary property tax rate is something that can be used for just general purposes. So for your general fund services. A secondary property tax is only assessed when you incur debt. So if we wanted to build the recreation center and we wanted to ask our property owners to have to pay for that through their property taxes, they would pay for that over a period of time and then it would go away. Primary stays in place always. You can have multiple different debts. Good question. So that's the sales tax. As far as the sales tax calendar, the sales tax ballot measure must be taken to the voters in November of even-numbered years, so that would be this November. So how does it play out? What are the kind of the main timelines or milestones in the next 6 months, 6 to 7 months? So now through May, we would continue to hold work sessions. In June, the council would have to call the election to increase the tax rate. And then in July, the council would vote on what the actual ballot language would be. And then, of course, in November, there would be the election. And then, of course, we would want to do plenty of public outreach throughout that period of time. When we look at a primary property tax, so similarly, this is assuming some sort of levy, right? So at the bottom of the chart, if we chose that we wanted $1 million a year levy, all the way up to $5 million, this is the amount that would be imposed on a property owner, and there are quite a few assumptions in here, so it could definitely change, but based on our current City of Kingman property valuations, our assessed value, and assuming that a property owner has a $175,000 assessed valued property, this would be the additional amount on their property tax bill that they would pay that would go directly to the City of Kingman. So, so again, it can range.
Quick question. Is it linear? Does 350,000 have 666?
It would be. It sure would be. And again, the assessed valuation is not the market value of a property. It is less than that. And this is based on this year's property valuations, right? We know during the economic downturn, assessed valuations went way low, and so it would be a different cost to the property owners at that time. So there is that fluctuation piece to it. And then what does the primary property tax calendar look like? So the primary property tax ballot measure must be taken to voters in May. Again, it's not May of 2024 or 25 or 26, it's just in May, in any May. So now through November, we would hold council work sessions. In December is when the council would call the election to establish that primary property tax rate. And then in January, you would vote on the ballot question, and in May, would be when we would hold the election. So then the petition required, as far as the fire district, and Chief Yeager's here also to answer any questions. He's worked for fire districts, and so he can answer any detailed questions that you might have, right? But as far as the formation, as far as it works, it is much more lengthy process than this. But overall, the fire district would, there would be some sort of impact statement that would need to be completed. It would go to the Board of Supervisors, the Mojave County Board of Supervisors. They would look at it and ultimately probably approve it. The petition process would then begin, meaning that we would be required to obtain a majority. More than half of the owners of the taxed property would have to approve it. And more than half of the assessed valuation of the property would also have to be approved. So it would require both of those. If you have the right number of signatures, then it would go back to the Board of Supervisors, who would order that a district would be created. Currently in statute, there's a maximum levy of $3.75 per $100 in valuation, in assessed valuation. That comes out to about $9.8 million currently where we are today with the city of Kingman's assessed valuation. So that's about an annual budget of $9.8 million. I can tell you that with the city of Kingman Fire Department today, for fiscal year 24's budget, it looks at, it's just about $10 million is where it is currently. And that takes into account their portion of the pension obligation debt as well. So what are the considerations, or maybe some of the reasons why you would or wouldn't want to move this direction, is that the city loses total control at that point, right? We have no control over response times or anything that they do. They have a different board, and they are in control of it. Also, that fluctuation in assessed valuation, so they may be able to have a $10 million budget this year, but next year it may decrease, so something would have to decrease, so their service would potentially decrease as well. And again, that budget capacity to be able to pay for the fire operations. And then we would have fire fleet and we would have fleet and facilities. So what would we do with that? Would we lease it to the fire district? Would we sell it to the fire district? Would they want all of it? And if not, what would we do with it? So there's that minor consideration at all. But those are some of the considerations that you would want to take if this was something that you would want to move forward with. And that's what I have for some different options to consider. And certainly what we're looking for are any questions that you might have. And if any of these are the direction that you might want to move forward with, we can start looking at some different options and scenarios and bring some data, actual data back to you.
Thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.
Council, questions?
Yes, I do have a question about going to a district as far as what we currently have in place. How many departments work under the fire department here?
We have the dispatch center and the fire department.
Okay, so the public's code enforcement and all that stuff's taken away from them? What about planning and zoning?
That stays in development services also.
That stays in development services?
And dispatch would stay here. The fire department would just be their own district, would be in their district.
Can I get Jack's opinion
Yes.
on this, please? As far as Bullhead, I know they're their own district. How is that working for them?
I can't speak for Bullhead, how it's working for them. I know that's just what they started as a fire district, so they never, when the city incorporated, they never went into the city budget. So I worked for districts most of my career, 30 years of my career. Just because when we're talking budget, the city's budget now is close to 10 million. You're looking at 9 if you did a district, but you've also got to take off the top. So that 10 is our operating budget. And if we start with 9, now I've got to take off the cost of a financial department, human resources department, all of the administrative functions that the city does for us has a cost associated with it when you're with the district. And so that money comes off the top of that. Now you're also, sorry, my voice. So now you're also looking at the costs of facilities, fleet, everything that district would have to create starting over. So, so me as the city fire chief, I do not want to see that happen. I think we're better off as a city. One, the city council would lose complete control of the fire district. because they would have their own board, their own governing body. So not saying we wouldn't get along and you wouldn't work well with them. Bullhead gets along well with their city that they serve. It's just, it can be challenging when you're having two governmental bodies competing for the same interests. So that's just my personal take on it. I came to work for the city, so I did not have to work for a district. There is huge benefits of being part of the city fire department.
And just to elaborate on human resources and finance and attorney, we don't, currently the city does not charge any of those services to the fire department, to any of the general fund departments, so that definitely would create an increase in them.
Just out of curiosity, once you become a district, can you be brought back into the city?
It's a process, just like it is trying to create your own district. Yeah, I mean, you still have to go through the Board of Supervisors process at the county. Just as information, we tried that with Northern Arizona Fire District when we tried to separate Valley Vista. The Board of Supervisors actually did not approve it, so it had to go to the voters. It ended up not working, but it's a process. It's easier to come into a district than it is to separate and go out of a district.
That was my question, is because I was wondering what the history of NAFD was,
Oh.
and why it's just that north side of town.
Because it's easier to bring them in, because that's just a vote of the boards, the fire district boards, versus if you separate it, now becomes a vote of the public to go back. So it's usually harder.
Any other questions for Jack? Yeah.
There was a year or two where our lobbyist, they were working with the Arizona legislature trying to get some rules changed in regards to the fire districts. And I just bring this up for everybody to think about. There is one town in the Phoenix area, I think it's Fountain Hills, but I won't say I can't say that for sure, but they have different rules. And so their fire district is under their city. And they own, if I am remembering correctly, they own like their fire stations and equipment, but it's taxed as a fire district. And I think that was because of the coverage that they have to do between multiple cities. I don't remember all the details, but I remember the Dorn Group for sure was trying to get those rules to apply to everyone in Arizona. And we looked at that because it would allow us to keep control and to keep all these assets that we have, but to basically be taxing as a fire district instead of it coming out of the general fund. And if that is something that the city is still interested in possibly pursuing, then we would want to give that direction to them to keep working on that. But I know we weren't the only city that was interested in it. But it's hard, it's difficult to convince the legislature because they don't want the cities creating any new kinds of ways to tax citizens, even if it's for public safety, which is a noble cause. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that there was a time when we were working on trying to get that to apply to all cities in Arizona.
And we actually worked with the league, right? So the league has a board that's comprised of mayors, maybe council members too. But we were trying to get them to push something forward as far as allowing municipalities to have control over a fire district. And I recall that it was Mayor Miles at the time, and she pled her case to that board, and none of them approved of it. They said, no, we do not want the league to move forward with it. So I don't know how much support it would have on that, but definitely it's something, if the council would like, we can definitely look at it and ask Dorn Policy Group to take that initiative on.
My experience with fire boards has been constant infighting. It's like nobody's in charge and everybody wants to be. and it just, from what I've seen of the fire districts, not all of them, but there's a good many of them, that the internal running of the fire department, I don't think we want to lose control of it. And I don't see any, because even if we went with the fire district, they would have to buy our buildings, our equipment, everything else out of that budget, and they're, I mean, I don't see it. Just my opinion.
Yeah, certainly you'd still have to comply with the statute levels, right? The levy levels or, the rates. So even if the municipality had control over it, we still could only have a certain budget, so.
Counselor Eric, did you have something?
I'm wondering. So the programs that KFD does right now, they'd be a lot more difficult to do under a district as well, right? You would lose a lot of support for your trainings, certifications, everything that you guys are able to do. And
It's just like here at the city, it would be up to that fire board to direct what they expect out of
Yeah,
their
I-
fire department, so, and I work for you guys, so you set the parameters that you want me to work in, and that's what we do. So yeah, it'd be whatever guidance that we are given to move forward.
Dina, can I change the question? Can I ask a topic that's not necessarily with the fire district as much as it is about a public safety tax or fee? Yes? Okay.
Sorry, yes.
So in the highlight section, it says it may not levy or assess a municipally-wide tax or fee against property owners based on the size or value of the owner's real property or improvements to real property for any public. What if it's just a flat fee for citizens based on you live in city limits, use fire services or police services, and we want to put a flat rate fee on for a public safety fee?
That's what Fountain Hills was trying to do, just a
Okay.
flat fee for
Not
each property,
percentage-based, not
not
property-based.
percentage-based. Mhm.
Got it.
And that didn't work.
Jack, how would it look if, I know we don't do it as a city, but I know other fire departments, what if we started billing for our services? As in, when we go out on the highway for a wreck, it happens outside the city limits, I mean, even ones that happen in the city limits. I know the fire district north of us, you call 911, and let's say it was a gas line pickup, somebody's getting a bill for that.
Yeah, I'd have to work more with Carl. There is state statutes that allow us to bill for some things, but not a lot, so.
More on what we can bill for, what would our calls look like? I know we go out on a lot of medical, but I don't know if we really should be going, the ambulance should. A lot, no?
With the CON, sorry, I guess,
Where I was
Finish
going
your
with this
statement.
Is, I know the ambulance has been short-staffed, and we have to send our medics sometimes because they don't have enough medics on staff, so we're running our trucks, I've always been against, a city going into the private industry, but here lately with the medic situation, should we be in the ambulance business? 'Cause I've heard other fire districts actually do, other fire departments, I don't want to call them districts, but other departments that do run their own ambulances are actually subsidizing and doing well with it.
Tina actually has me putting a presentation together for the 11th workshop
Okay.
on just,
sorry.
on just that topic.
All right, because,
So I'll be presenting that to you.
I know we run on a lot of calls that are out of district, and I don't know why we couldn't bill for that to help offset our cost that our fire department incurs.
Carl, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, because we're not allowed to. There's only a couple statutes that allow for some of those types of billings. And the state is under, there's a legal philosophy, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but basically, the community as a whole pays for the emergency services. So charging an individual for those types of emergency services have been basically denied by the courts. I know some places still try to send out bills anyways. I'm not a big fan of just billing somebody with the hopes that they may or may not pay, even if we're not going to collect. But I like I said, I know we're pretty limited on what we can charge for those types of services.
I would like to look into that and see what we can and what we can't, just to see what it would look like to offset.
Absolutely.
And can we add the police aspect of that too? Because I know DPS does a use of finite resources and it's $75 if you get pulled over.
Sounds like a speeding ticket.
I'm not sure what that question was for, Counselor Eric.
He was wanting us to
But-
look at police too. Same concept, but on the police side.
Charging, I guess charging a fee for something?
Yeah, so for a response time to something that maybe we can get reimbursed for.
Like, I don't know
Okay.
if it's
Right.
true, for example, but like in Tucson, we'd always heard that if the helicopter goes up, they bill you for it. So, I don't know, something along those lines.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Comments?
I'll have more, but not on the fire department.
So just in line with the charging people for police services, what is our ability to charge more for speeding tickets or reckless driving or crimes that we want to start really coming down on? Is there the potential of adding a fee every time you get that ticket to help support the police department and expanding with our growth?
So I don't know if Carl wants to answer on this either. I know obviously there is, I want to say there's state statute on some of those. I don't know what our ability is to increase those, but I can certainly look into it. Carl, do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, so for anything that's charged under state statute, the court assesses and collects whatever fees that are associated with it. And there's a statutory disbursement where those monies go somewhere. We don't get to retain very much of it. The only way that we get to retain any set amount of a charge is if we have a city ordinance that has mandatory minimums. Then at that point, we could keep some of those monies for whatever. So, for instance, with our abatement, if we have a criminal charge of an abatement, I can't remember what the mandatory minimum is off the top of my head, but say it's $100. If the court assesses a $200 fine, the $100 stays with the city, but it goes specifically to our abatement fund. The other $100 would be assessed or distributed per the statutory scheme of disbursement of those collected fines. But you have to remember that criminal fines are not a funding mechanism. That's not what they're there for. And you get some pushback and some issues if you try and do something like, excuse me, like that.
But
So
if
I
we're
would-
trying to tackle crime, if we're trying to deter people from driving like idiots and we create a mandatory minimum on speeding, we can do that. And then that money comes back to the city. Is that right?
Yes and no, because then you're saying we're going to be creating a speeding citation that's a city fine. But again, you can't use it to generate revenue. So I'm not sure, because that sounds like that's what you're trying to do, and that's not what it's there for.
Can we use it to pay for programs that would
Well,
educate the
I- what-
public or?
I guess what we can do is we can dig into that some more, but I would just, it's not a resource for funding city operations. There are some places that do that out of state. Arizona is not one of those generally. And then you have to be careful of where, if you're trying to generate revenue with these citations, you can cause kind of some ill effects and incentives for law enforcement actions, which is why it's generally frowned upon.
We can look,
But we'll definitely look.
Those statutory disbursements you mentioned, can those be reassessed or evaluated?
That's the legislature, state legislature that
Okay.
does that. You can always ask, but we can talk to the legislature about it, and they could be reevaluated. I think that's an uphill battle, but it's something you can look into.
and I can just share that of those fees that are collected, as far as the amount that is what we call police fees, we collect less than $20,000 a year in those. So,
All right, I'll go through my list. I know you're chomping at the bit.
No, go ahead.
I don't have that much. As far as the building permits and the planning and zoning fees, I'd like us to be able to see something that's broken down between commercial and residential for both the planning and the building permits. That definitely seems, because that's going to be passed on. Private homeowners, yeah, it's going to be, but it's going to be basically your builders that are going to be taking the hit on that. And that's going to get passed on to the buyer. So I have no problem looking at increasing those at all, but if we could get a breakdown of that, please, I'd appreciate that. And then something for Mike. This may have been brought up at a meeting as far as the golf course. I'd like to know how many rounds a year that are being golfed there, how many memberships are there, and I'm pretty sure that they charge citizens whether or not they get a cart rental or use their own carts. It's the same amount of money. That might be something we might want to look into as well. So if we can get an update from Mike on that, I would like that, please. And that's it for my questions.
thank you.
Any other comments? Anybody have any comments on sales tax, TPT?
Can I get a refresher on what the last one that got voted down, what that process was like, how much we asked for, how much it lost by, if that's a number you have?
I don't have the exact numbers of the loss, but it was about a 65-35 split as far as the nays and the ayes on the vote. As far as the amount, it was just under 0.6%, so it was, I think, 0.56 is what we were actually asking for as far as the rate increase, and it was going to generate, what was that going to generate? About $5 million. I want to say $5 to $5.5 million.
And was it,
It was for streets. It was for the streets program.
it was for streets, and it was advertised as for streets, and people were just like, no? Was there fight back on it? Was there a campaign against it? Do you have any more information?
Some of the feedback that I heard, as far as not being in favor of it, is they wanted it sunset. They wanted a sunset clause in there. There was more people that would vote for it if it had a sunset date.
Which means it goes away after a while. And, okay.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with having a 5-year renewal or whatever.
No.
But basically, Jengus, they didn't believe us. They didn't believe we'd use it for the streets.
Yeah, that was a struggle.
That's the feedback I got from most of the general public was they had no confidence that we would use that money for the streets, even though it was specifically for the streets, and that's what it had to be used for. They just either didn't understand it or didn't trust us to do it.
Well, we had also a large contingency of people that were outside of the city limits. They couldn't vote, but they were very vocal in their opposition to it. So, and those were the folks that are driving into town on the roads, so they had quite the voice when it came down to it, so. Anybody else have any comments?
I think if we were to do that again, we need to approach it differently. We need a lot more information out there, a lot more town halls where we can interact with the people, where I spoke at several of the Republican things, but you're only talking to a few people, and a lot of them are in the county. So, I mean, if you could actually address the people in the city and get them to believe you and understand what they're voting on, it might pass. But that's the only way. If you don't convince them, they're not going to vote for it. I mean, it's a lot of people are an automatic no on any tax levy. They're just burnt out with government, period. And they don't trust us to do what we say we'll do. And we just didn't, I guess we didn't do a good enough job selling it. I mean, that's just my opinion.
I think you're right, Spike, because I think if people saw what we're up against, how much fire takes, how much police takes, how much Parks and Rec takes, it's hard to run a city on what we get,
And we didn't break it down that way.
and that's what needs to
We
be.
didn't have that
education.
information to, well, it was probably there, but we didn't prepare ourselves with it. And I hadn't been elected yet when I was doing that. I was promoting it when I was running for election. And quite honestly, I was surprised I got elected because there were a lot of people that were adamant, and it was the trust issue, and I don't know how we get around that. I mean, we just have to do a much better job of selling it. I think town halls is one way to do it. The bad thing about town halls is they get out of hand. And a lot of times the people at the town halls that are causing it to get out of hand aren't people that live in the city. They're people that live out in the county or political people. And I don't know, I'm not afraid of it. I don't mind doing it. I kind of like confrontation. It doesn't bother me a lot. And, but the information was there if they wanted to look it up. But nobody's going to look up our city budget. They don't do it. I talk to people all the time. I say, go online and look at our budget. And you'll get a better understanding. I said, I didn't know until I got in there that certain monies can only be used for certain things, and that this grant covers that, and this grant covers that. So it doesn't cost you a dime when we do that, unless it's a matching grant. And the people just don't understand it.
Well, and two, I think at the time we were sitting on some reserves that there also were a lot of folks that wanted those reserves brought down and used, which we did.
Yes, they believed
They-
that we were sitting on money that we wouldn't use, that we had the money to do the streets and we wouldn't do it.
Right, which is what we ended up doing when we were forced to have
Exactly.
to do
We
that.
proved them right when we
So,
used the money for the streets. But what we have to be able to make the people understand is that we can't continue to do that.
correct.
Once the streets are done, the next time they need redone, we got no money to do it. And I don't know how you get that out there to the average citizen, especially people my age, retired, on a fixed income. And you mentioned taxes. Even a lot of them that came from California where the taxes were outrageous, the first thing they say is no on taxes. They don't even listen to what you're saying.
Well, and a good portion of those funds that would have been generated were going to come from people that lived outside the city and tourists
I understand.
that are coming. So trying to convince them that it's not all on the backs of the citizens. I mean, yes, everybody pays TPT.
Well, you were there.
But the demographic of the ratepayers to that TPT, there are more outside of the city limits and tourists that would contribute to that pot than the ratepayers. So I don't know, I just kind of wanted to get an appetite for where we are, because we did, when we were forced to, we spent those monies down, and now we need to start looking at what does that look like, 6 years from now.
Well, so, I agree with Smiley. It's a trust issue more than anything. And I believe that what we need to do is to continue doing our Citizen Academy, but it needs to be done on a quarterly basis, because then you have ambassadors out in the community that can explain to their friends and neighbors how the city works. I think that we need to start doing citizen budgets, but like you and I had talked about, doing a business breakfast where we invite business owners and we give a presentation on the budget, maybe on some of the economic development things, and we do that every year. And maybe, a few other events to invite people in, and then we go over the budget, because we've got to get to these groups of people to explain to them and show them. And I think we also desperately need a PIO who would work on a campaign, an education campaign, because I think it's too late to do this year. But if we said, okay, in 2 years, we want to relook at this, we should be working on a campaign for the next 2 years to start educating the public on what the budget looks like, what those shortfalls look like, and what we would do with more money. And I think that having a professional information officer who could help build that trust, help us build some community pride. And then we also assist in some of these breakfasts, and I'm all for town halls. I think that's a great idea. I think we need to start doing those more regularly. But those are I think we need to commit today to do it in 2 years, and then really have a laid out plan, and we have a professional communications person that can put that campaign together for us, so that when it gets to the point that we vote to put this on the ballot, there's already good education out there, and then we're just really going to these Republican meetings and sharing information about where we would spend it or what it would look like, instead of trying to educate on the budget and where the majority of our money is going to police and fire. But I still see comments all the time saying, where does my sales tax go? And it's like, are you kidding? You get all these services, but the general public doesn't know that, and they're not going out to look for it. So we have a lot of work to do, building trust and getting the right information out. I still see all the time people say that Kingman has the highest sales tax rate, which came out on the first sales tax increase that we tried to do, and they still don't believe there's no property tax, and it's hard to convince people in a group. So if we start really investing in education, I think we could get a lot further in properly funding our city.
I agree. And to add to your list, I'd also like to see a cross-section of citizens that would help us craft what something would look like that we could take to the ballot. Because if we take input from our citizens when we are trying to craft what it is we want to take to the voters, it's true representation of their wants and wishes. So had we known that, we would have got quite a few more yes votes if we sunset, I don't think any of us were opposed to sunsetting. Let's be real, our streets are always going to need attention. They don't sunset. But if we knew that was there, like you said, Councilor Ward, there's no reason why we couldn't revisit it with a 5-year renewal or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
where I came from, most of the levies that are like a sales tax levy, even if they increase it, it's for a time period. And if the people see that you're doing what you say you're going to do with that money, they don't have a problem when it comes to renewing it. I've seen renewal after renewal after renewal of the same levy.
sure.
And
If we went from chip sealing to some other kind of maintenance,
or anything that made it.
right?
yeah,
It
that
would
made a
be
better
obvious.
street.
It'd be
And-
obvious it was better.
And actually, I've had a lot of complaints on what we've done, and I've told them, hey, we're doing the best we can with the money we got to cover the whole city. And, well, all they did was came in and covered what was, I said, yeah. So that bump's still there. That bump's gonna be there until we replace that street, and we definitely don't have the money to do it. And if you believe we do, you need to look at our budget, because it's just not there.
Right. And I agree, we need to not rush this process, and we need to put it on our radar if that's what we want to do in 2 years. Some of us may or may not be here in 2 years, so.
So I believe we have a really, on one of the May council meetings, we have, Jack's going to be coming to the council with this roadmap for this website landing page that I'd asked for, that had everything ready to be laid out, because I was getting the same thing. People were like, I don't even know where you guys spend our road money on, or you guys are doing this so awfully, like, why can't you guys? And I wanted a site where I could just be like, go to cityofkingman.gov/roads, and it'll lay out everything, what we did last, what's coming up, why, if we wanted to put on, lay out the budget on there and put, like, this is how this $11 million has been spent, we could, or just lay out, like, the reason there's, pebble and gravel on the roads is because we don't have these elevator sweepers. Like, however we wanted to lay it out, just a website that was easy to navigate and clear and cut. And if that it has a proper cost and it's something we can afford, it would be a great launching pad for something that's like a 2-year information campaign. It'll get people more used to the website. So I look forward to that. Like, I think that'll be a good, seeing what that costs, even if it's like a comment box that people can just engage with us with and be like, hey, we have a pothole on this road, or hey, I advise, you know, you guys do this, or your chip seal's cracking already, or however, you know. Something like that, that would be in addition to the town halls would be a great little,
Well, and I mean, it doesn't even have to be a town hall format. The only reason I said that is I'm used to town halls back east because that's the way you got the information out. And I've had so many complaints since I've been on council about people that come to call the public and we just sit up there. I said, we're not allowed to say anything. We can't interact with you at call of the public. Well, what do you mean? I said, it's law. That's the way it is. You can't interact during call of the public. And there's still so many people that don't understand that. And I don't know how you get it. Yeah. But that's how, the town halls was how we did it back east. And I'm not saying that's the way to do it. I'm just saying that is a way where you can interact with them. And it gets heated sometimes. It's not fun.
Question for Carl. Would that violate open meeting laws if we have more than 3 council members at one of those?
Yeah, you have to be really careful about creating a meeting. It's not to say you can't do it, but then you need, because it's going to be a discussion of something that's going to come before the council for legal action. So if you were to do something, a town hall with all the council there, it becomes problematic because then it reduces some of the flexibility of the discussion because, because it has to be on the agenda.
Well, we could put on the agenda that we're open for discussion to discuss streets, taxes, police, fire. We could go through the list of the main complaints and post that, correct?
As you see, I'm trying to formulate a response to
Well,
that.
because we had a town hall to discuss the sales tax. It was at the
Right.
county, it was a packed house, we got all kinds of comments, and we were
Because-
able to get information out. So if we had some parameters about what we were there to discuss, that would allow that to happen. Or if somebody had a different topic, let's say fluoride, they could still come up and speak, and we could put that down and just let them know we'd put it on the agenda for the next town hall, because it wasn't on this one.
Yeah, you're creating a council meeting is what you're saying.
In the form of a town hall.
Yeah.
Sure. Or a workshop with public input, right? Whatever it has to be, but it has to be possible to have a town hall in Arizona.
Well, I'm not saying you can't do it and you can't try it, and we can set something up to do that. There's always the possibility that someone can file an open meeting law complaint and we deal with that as it occurs. It may or may not be an open meeting law violation, but we can try and, if we're to do that, we can try and craft it in a broad enough sense to allow for some of that discussion with making it clear there's no legal action being taken. But, I just always want to caution everybody, the AG's office is the ones that ultimately make those decisions. And I know a few years back, we had 4 council members appear at essentially a town hall, and they were just they weren't even participating. They were just attending this meeting. But it was information that was going to become in front of the council at a later point, and someone filed an open meeting law complaint about it. We managed to talk the AG's office down, but it's just one of those things you have to be careful about how far you go with that kind of a situation, because it's not Arizona. The open meeting law is not set up for that. It's not set up for the entire council to show up for a public, just free for all discussion.
that sounds like the Catholic Charities event that we had last year. We all went to that. But also, what if does this whole thing go away if only 3 of us went and we took shifts?
Well,
Huh?
we can try and sort something out for that and see how we can make it work. I know we've done town halls in the past where it's a couple council members or no council members and it's staff, and then they can kind of gather the information. I know some municipalities may have wards. They just may have a particular one council member in that particular ward or district have a town hall. We can look and see what we can kind of craft, but it's it's always something you just have to be careful about, because as I keep saying, I didn't write the open meeting law, but it's designed to be difficult to do kind of what you're looking to do.
Can I
But
change
we
the-
can see what we can come up with.
Can I change the topic if everyone's done? Okay.
Please.
Can we look into what the pros and cons of annexing Northern would be with all the businesses on there?
We can. That's a long project, so I wouldn't be able to say by next council meeting, but we can look at that. And are you talking to Northern, not past Northern? We
I
wouldn't,
mean, I don't know if it's allowed to go.
everything north of Gordon?
I was thinking just the north side of Northern to Gordon. Could you put a sliver of Kingman right down just Gordon and just avoid homes? Because there's a
You
lot.
have to be very careful in annexation, and again, without looking at a map, trying to decipher how that plan would work. But you can't wall off sections of the town. So yeah, there's some geographical constraints on how you can do annexation.
Okay, so to the stores on the northern end of Northern, on the northern side of Northern.
And are we
From
talking between Bank
from
and
Gordon.
Stockton Hill?
Gordon?
Or,
Oh, yeah, yes.
but for the east
Yes.
and west boundaries?
Yes.
Along with that, Tina, did you ever get an answer from Rob and Jack about the light there on Northern?
I did not.
Any other comments? Questions? All right. With that, we'll adjourn.